and Trevor improved his Ironman marathon from a 4:56 down to a 3:28, and this led to an overall improvement in his Ironman performance from an 11:40 to a 9:25 finishing time. So it starts with the bike, and your efficiency on the bike significantly impacts how you're going to run. And so just to review a couple of basics, when you are on the bike, you're burning through carbs and fats. The higher intensity that you push, the higher percentage of carbs that you're burning through. And it's important to know the intensity that you're riding at, what metabolic demand is that creating? In other words, how many kilocalories of carbohydrates is that costing you? And that's important because we only have, our bodies only have a certain capacity to store glycogen. And yes, we can fuel on the bike, which is absolutely essential. But when we get to the run, if we have tapped into too much of our storage, that's going to negatively impact your run. So let's take a deeper look at how testing with Trevor really influenced his race plan and his fueling plan. So I test with Inside. It's a software that allows a coach to really get into an athlete's physiological profile, to really know what makes an athlete tick, really what we need to work on, and then are we going in the right direction, and then finally, how are we going to use this information to come up with a race plan that's going to yield the best result for the athlete. So using the Inside testing software, we looked at Trevor's output and his fuel demand at various intensities. And so one key point in how Trevor uses fuel, and for every athlete, is the point at which your body goes from burning predominantly fat to burning predominantly carbohydrates. And for Iron, every racing distance is different, but for Ironman racing, this becomes a very, very huge part of the equation. Okay, so for Trevor at 229, let's just call it 230 watts, he begins to burn predominantly more carbohydrates, which, as you know, this becomes a ticking time bomb, because at this intensity and at this fuel rate, he's not going to be able to keep up with that. So I knew that we needed to race well below that. Okay, so exactly how far below, we're going to take a look at right now. So we knew at Trevor's peak, at his peak fat combustion, he's at about 192 watts. Okay, so he's contributing, his body is fueling that intensity with predominantly fat, and that's a pretty mild intensity for him. And I knew that for a race situation, this is not going to be acceptable. He needed to push beyond that. So we started just knowing Trevor. We had to establish some upper limits. Okay, so one of the upper limits was don't go over 230 watts. You have no business going over 230 watts, no matter how great you feel. But that was one of the limits. And then we gave him a range, okay, because racing is dynamic, right? You can't just stick to an exact wattage the whole entire time. We gave him a range, and his range became 210 watts to about 220 watts, okay, with more of a conservative start. And I knew this would be tough for him, but that was the plan. So if we take a look at the fueling here, at 210 watts, he would be burning through 340 calories per hour, okay? At 210 watts, 340 calories per hour of carbohydrates is the metabolic demand. Now, if we went up higher intensity, if we went to 220, this jumps up to 388 watts is the demand. I'm sorry, 388 calories is the demand. And so looking at 340 to 388, okay, 210 to 220, we know we needed to stay within this window so that if he fuels at a rate of 350 calories of carbohydrates per hour, he would not come off the bike in a deficit. And the reason why with Trevor I didn't want him in a deficit off of the bike is because he had not established a pattern of staying strong all the way through his Ironman marathon. His first Ironman marathon was a 4:56. So it's always better to start a little conservative and then get more aggressive as I work with an athlete more often for a longer period of time. So Trevor was able to execute on this plan. His watts at the end of the ride, at the end of the race, at the end of the bike split were 211 watts. He fueled at a rate of about 340 calories per hour, and he was able to run really well.
On the bike, my plan was to use a combination of Never Second C30 drink mix and Martan gels to consume 340 calories of carbs every hour. And I was pretty much able to hit my nutrition strategy spot on.
And so if we look at his pace per mile, if we take the first 13 miles and the second 13 miles, it was about a 12-second slowdown, which is not a significant slowdown, and that actually led to his overall improvement in his run. He went from a 4:56 marathon to a 3:28. Now, fueling is a big part of your ability to run and to run to your potential. On race day, we're not looking for anything spectacular like this pace that we've never run before. We're just looking for the ability to run to our potential. And for most people, if they're able to run on the fast end of zone 2, that's an incredible breakthrough for them. But oftentimes, people are so far in a deficit, or they get the fueling wrong on the bike, they're so far into a deficit that it becomes, much slower than a zone 2 intensity, and many times it becomes a walk when you planned on running the whole thing. So that's a huge part of getting the most out of yourself. You really want to make sure your efficiency on the bike matches your intensity on the bike matches your fueling demand. And in order to be able to identify that, testing becomes an important part of that. So if you are struggling to run well off of the bike, and what I mean by struggling to run well, if you're running paces that seem really, really easy for you in training, but you can't get close to those on race day, then there's a big chance that a lot of that is being created by the bike. Okay, so fueling is one part of it. That's not the whole equation, right? You still have to do the training specific to your needs as an athlete, and fueling is one component of that. But knowing what you need to work on the bike to really allow yourself to go into the run without being totally compromised, so you can execute what you have the potential of. So this was a huge success for Trevor, a huge personal best. He finished on the podium, had a great race, ran solid all the way through. And
comparing my Ironman Arizona experience to my first Ironman experience in Maryland is really difficult because so many things about my training has changed since then. I think the biggest difference between those two experiences, though, is that I went into Ironman Arizona feeling informed and well prepared. When I first started working with Joby at FC Endurance, we completed my first inside test, and he was able to use that data to determine which of my physiological characteristics we needed to focus on during training in order to improve my race performance. And then the week before Ironman Arizona, we were able to use data from another inside test to determine my fat max zone and create an appropriate pacing strategy. This data-driven approach was incredibly different and much more effective than the methods I was able to employ on my own for Ironman Maryland, and the results definitely show that. And man, going fast at an Ironman is way more fun than walking the marathon, that's for sure.
if you focus on the right training that's going to be best for you, and you know at what intensity you need to ride at and at what you need to fuel at, it's going to stack the cards in your favor to allow you to have a great run. Now, there are other components to that, like, yes, you have to make sure that how you train on the run is leading to efficiency, and looking at those factors, looking at what you need as an individual. But fueling is a big part of the equation, especially if you have been consistent with your training and you put in the work. Dialing in your fueling, especially on the bike, is going to be a big factor. So I just wanted to share that with you in case anybody is maybe struggling to run well off of the bike. this is one thing that you should consider in addition to what you're doing for training. So hopefully that helps. And if you have any questions, let me know. But hope you enjoyed this.